Yeah, let the big dog hunt. Hello again, everybody. Joe Staszak along with my man Steve Kallas right over there. It's time for another episode of Kallas Remarks with yours truly and man of the hour, Steve Kallas. Steven, how are you today? August 6th, getting into football camp. First game was last night, the Hall of Fame game. I know it was what it was, but, you know, there's real football being played these days. But we want to start with the NBA free agency, kind of winding down. You got Mike Conley staying home, Chris Paul staying home. John Collins signed a big deal with his own team, the Atlanta Hawks. And then you got some movement. What did you think about, like, Kyle Lowry going to the Heat and Carmelo and Dwight Howard teaming up? I mean, are these guys still allowed to play at their age? I mean, what's going on? They're playing for the Lakers now? Like, Dwight Howard's back with the Lakers. Well, what's going on? What are your thoughts? And, of course, Kemba Walker to the Knicks. We can't forget.
You know, Carmelo was in the draft. Carmelo was in the draft the same year as LeBron, 2003.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Hey, he played well for Portland the last 2 years.
He did, yeah.
I'm just going to read you. I'm going to read you the guys the Lakers signed since they only had 4 players, right? They had the new big three and Gasol, and that's all they had. So they got to fill in the blanks. So here's who they've signed. Trevor Ariza, Wayne Ellington, Carmelo, Malik Monk. I love Malik Monk in college, but I always thought he needed another year. He didn't take the other year. He took the money, and now he's okay. I'm disappointed in Malik Monk. Kendrick Nunn, they re-signed Taylor Horton Tucker, and that's like become, and as you said, Dwight Howard. Meanwhile, Andre Drummond goes to the Sixers, right? They just switched. They switched backup centers. So I think the Lakers have filled in their roster. Is it enough? Because it's not just the big three. It's who do you have around the big three? So we're going to find out. I don't think that's a particularly, oh my goodness, fill in the roster. But we'll have to wait and see. You know, the Heat, we've talked about Duncan Robinson in the past. My daughter was up at Williams when Duncan Robinson was a D3 player. And I think I told you, I walked into the gym one day. I walked into the gym one day to watch a D3 game, and I saw this 6'7" guy hit 9 threes in a row in practice. And I said to my daughter, who's this guy and what's he doing here? So after 1 year, he goes to Michigan. He signs with the Heat. The league has become a 3-point shooting league. And now he's got a 5-year contract for stupid money. And you know what? He deserves it.
Totally deserves it.
So,
I totally agree with you. What did you think about the guys staying?
They also signed. Say it again.
I'll let you finish. I was just going to say, what did you think about the guys staying home with their respective clubs that I had mentioned, like Mike Conley?
Yeah, I just wanted to say Victor Oladipo signed a 1-year minimum contract with Miami because he's coming off quad surgery. So he'll have a lot to prove. But yeah, with all these guys, you're not going to let Chris Paul go. You're not going to let Kawhi Leonard go. I know he hasn't officially signed yet, but they're renegotiating a long-term deal.
Right.
Conley is a big time. Conley, when healthy, is a big time player. So yeah, you kind of thought. I think generally you thought all those guys would stay, and all those guys are staying. I heard Woj on ESPN say the Sixers are still trying to trade Ben Simmons, but I don't know what you're going to get for him at this point.
At this point, no.
So I don't know what's going to happen there, but apparently they're still shopping him, and his value to me couldn't be lower after shooting, what did he shoot, 34% from the free throw line.
Worst ever.
He's a great defender. He's a great defender, as you know.
He does a lot of really good things. He does.
Yeah, but the biggest one that he doesn't do, obviously, is I won't even try to shoot from the outside, and I haven't really improved my foul shooting, and that's a problem.
That's a huge problem, bro. I'm with you. Now, I wanted to talk a little football before we get into some other things. Talked about the Hall of Fame game and whatnot. Let's talk some quarterback situations. If you can read into this a little bit, is there anything to read into? The Eagles, for some reason, have not, and I don't care really, but they haven't named Jalen Hurts the starting quarterback, okay? Okay, it's an open competition, Joe Flacco. Or is that because he might be involved in trade talks with the Texans for Deshaun Watson? Is that still, because I'm still hearing, I mean, they want a boatload for Deshaun Watson, and then, of course, I think you might need some insurance because he might get suspended for half a year, a whole year. Who knows what's going to happen there? And then there's a situation in Indianapolis. I shouldn't laugh, but you had this conversation, an argument with people all the time whether Carson Wentz was injury prone or not. The definition is injured a lot. Okay, Carson Wentz is injured again. Out. He could be out 3 months. What do the Colts do in this situation? Because I know, and I want you can tell the story about Frank Reich in his press conference protecting Carson Wentz, but he does have a season where his team's pretty good. And Jacob Eason, are you really going to trot out Jacob Eason? Well, what are they going to do there?
It was so interesting. They asked Frank Reich about Wentz, and, he had the foot surgery. Originally, they were hoping it wasn't a big deal. It usually is a big deal with Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
And he's out 5 to 12 weeks. So here we are on August 6, 2021. If he's out 12 weeks, September, October, November 6th, assuming he can step in right away, which is a big assumption, the season's over. The interesting thing is, so a guy raises his hand and says, well, what about Nick Foles?
I love that guy. I love that
guy. And of course, Frank Reich had his greatest success with Nick Foles, and Nick Foles had his greatest success with Frank Reich as the offensive coordinator. They won the Super Bowl. So he goes, I love Nick Foles. I love everything about Nick Foles, but Carson's our quarterback. And last time I looked, Nick Foles is on the Chicago Bears. But here's another interesting thing I heard. Tell me if you heard this, because I just heard it last night. Phillip Rivers announced that he's going to stay in shape just in case late in the season, if somebody needs a quarterback, he'll be willing to come back. Now, I don't know if he knows the Carson Wentz, I'm out for 5 to 12 weeks. And would they go ask him to come back now and just be the quarterback until Wentz comes back? So you got to do something. I'm sorry, Joe.
No,
you got to do something. Okay.
No, I totally
can't make it up.
You can't make it up. That's interesting, the Phil Rivers, because he probably doesn't want to go through a camp in the whole season. But come trot me in for 5 or 8 games at the end of the season. All right, that's not a bad idea. But they need somebody now, and
correct.
Okay, let me ask you this. If that whole thing didn't happen in Philly and the Carson Wentz thing, whether it's real or not, is his head is he's soft and he's not, do they go out and try to make a play for Nick Foles? Where you mentioned, you just said he's had his most success ever with that quarterback to at least fill the void until Carson's back. If that whole thing didn't happen, like in a normal situation, would you go out and maybe go out after?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely 100%. But I think Frank Reich, looking long term, I can't do this to this guy again.
I know.
Nick Foles comes in, wins the Super Bowl. They build a statue of him outside of Indianapolis, and then Carson Wentz has to drive by it every day. I'm not even trying to be funny. That's not. I would bet that's not going to happen. Phillip Rivers is more likely to come back early if they give him enough dough, be our quarterback for 8 games. And then the problem will be, so he's the quarterback for 8 games, they're 7-1. You ain't taking him out for Carson Wentz when he's healthy.
Hell no. Carson Wentz. I'm sorry. And that is funny because you're right. Carson Wentz doesn't get a look again if Rivers comes in and tears it up. He's a borderline Hall of Fame quarterback. I mean, I know he has 13 kids to take care of at home, but he still can play probably a little bit. What about the situation in Philly that I mentioned? I'm sure, I guess Flacco, if you had to pick a guy to win one game, I mean, he's won a Super Bowl and whatnot, he's seasoned, but Jalen Hurts is supposed to be the next guy. And I'm hearing all this, and I thought it was a pipe dream a while ago, but now there's, the price has to come down, I think. But Deshaun Watson to the Eagles, do you think that's what they might be looking at? Are they really into this guy they took in the second round when Carson Wentz was healthy last year, 2 years ago?
I think it's a mistake not to name Hurts the quarterback now, because if you're going to trade him, you don't want other teams to think, is he better than Joe Flacco? Can we start him? No, you want him to be the guy.
Right.
So, but I think any team that's looking at Watson is looking more off the field than on. Is he going to just pay these people money and make them go away? Even if he does that, well, what you said, the NFL suspend him for 4 or 8 games. I don't know if you can call up the league and say what's going to happen with Watson.
Right.
That would determine me, the GM of the Eagles. I know they've got 5, right? They got 5 or 6 guys who could be the GM. If I'm the GM of the Eagles, I want to know what are we looking at? Because Flacco could play. Flacco could play 4 games, maybe.
Yeah.
Do you want him to play 8 games? He's in a division that's better, but still bad. Don't tell me the NFC East is real good this year after being maybe the worst division in history last year.
In history, right.
So I think you name him the starting quarterback, and he's got to go in any deal for Watson. The Texans have to want to trade him. He doesn't want to be there. Probably the only reason he came back is because he's got all these lawsuits pending, but there's no criminal action as far as I know. And I think maybe they can get a sense from the league. I don't think the league will say, yeah, we're giving them 4. Yeah, we're giving them 8. But they'll say, yeah, we're suspending them. And it's not going to be for 1 or 2 games. But I think the Eagles will be much better, as I'm sure you agree, if Watson walks in the door tomorrow, assuming he can play.
Right.
Assuming he's not charged criminally.
Right.
And we don't know if that's going to happen or not. I think, again, the problems are more off the field than the due diligence, not on the field, and can he play? Because, of course, he can play. And he's much better than anything the Eagles have.
Yeah, I still think he's a top 5 quarterback in the league. He had a great year last year, and they won 4 games just because the team was terrible. Let's talk a little baseball, and then we'll talk
Go.
Yeah.
Go. Can I talk about one more quarterback?
Absolutely.
Tom Brady turned 44 this week.
That's great.
44. And we've done this before, but I just want to read what he's done since he turned 40. Okay?
Yeah.
He's won 2 Super Bowls. He's been in 3, and he only threw for 505 yards in the 3rd one that he lost to the Eagles. He was the MVP. He was the MVP of the league in 2017, and he's 47-17 in the regular season since 2017, and that's 5 more wins than any other quarterback in that time span. And oh, by the way, he's already played in 299 games, and that's the most in the history of football. And I don't think anyone's ever going to break that record, because he's going to play in more this year and maybe more next year. Who knows? So I just wanted to mention that, because what he's done, whatever you think of TB12, whatever you think of Brady or the years with the Patriots, what he's doing now has not only never happened before, I don't think it'll ever happen again.
I totally agree with you. I just think it's phenomenal. Yeah, 44 this year. Their first day of camp was horrendous, apparently, and he was furious, and so was Bruce Arians, and they, kind of gave the team the business, and they came back the next day. They look like they're a little bit more serious about repeating this year. All 22 are back. It's going to be interesting to see if Tampa Bay can run it back again. A little bit of baseball you mentioned, and it was funny in our pre-meeting. Who wants it less, the Mets or the Phillies? Because, you're right. It's a close race in the National League East. They're just a half game behind the Mets. The Braves are a game and a half back. Your thoughts on what's going on in baseball right now? Of course, Tampa, the city of champions, they lead the AL East by a game and a half over the Sox.
Well, the NL East, I don't even know what to say. It's a bad division. And the Mets, on top of all the leads they've been blowing in games they've been losing to the Marlins, as you know, they don't have DeGrom for the whole month of August.
I know.
And the Cy Young this year is going to be so interesting because people think Ohtani won the other night and he's 6-1, and people think Ohtani is going to win the Cy Young in the AL, and people think DeGrom is the best pitcher by far in the NL. I think he's like 7-2, and I understand people who say wins are meaningless. That's ridiculous. Wins mean something. They don't mean as much as they used to. But you might have two guys with around 10 wins who are the leading candidates for Cy Young in their respective leagues. And that's kind of bizarre to me. The other thing I saw is I saw Max Scherzer in the Dodgers uniform for the first time. And, you know, he struck out 10. He got the win. Trevor Bauer is still on that leave/suspension. They don't call it a suspension, but I think it's a suspension in essence. So right now, Scherzer is replacing Bauer. But if Bauer comes back, I mean, they're just with all that pitching, they're just, to me, too dominant. But we'll have to wait and see. But Scherzer in the Dodger uniform should make it scary for every other team in baseball. Now, I give the Yankees credit. They were desperate for two lefty hitters. They went out and got Rizzo and Joey Gallo. Joey Gallo himself had more home runs, 25, than all the Yankee lefties put together the day he showed up, 22. And Rizzo got an RBI in each of the first 6 games as a Yankee. No Yankee ever in the history of the Yankees has ever done that in their first 6 games. And that's taken in a lot of ground, as you know. Sure. So the Yankees are going the right way. Now, their problem is Garrett Cole has COVID, not a close contact. He has COVID. I think Jordan Montgomery he's on the COVID list. I don't know if he has it or he was close to Garrett Cole. But Montgomery has been pitching better than Garrett Cole. And they lose both of those guys for, 10 days, maybe more. That's 2 starts for all of them. That's very tough. But now the Yankees are going to score more runs, especially at home, because they got 2 legitimate home run threats in Rizzo and Gallo that they didn't have before the trade deadline. They're a different team now because you put those lefties between the righties. Stanton's hitting a little bit. DJ LeMahieu is hitting a lot. Aaron Judge is trying to get on track. But their lineup, you look at their lineup, you're like, oh, my goodness. Luke Voit might be coming back, who led the majors in home runs last year, only 22 in the COVID season. He's coming back, and people are like, well, he's got no place to play. So they're putting Stanton in the outfield because maybe Voit will be the DH to get his bat in the lineup, obviously. But I think the Yankees are now going to make the playoffs. I didn't think they were before, but they're really short on the pitchers. Gallo hit a 3-run homer to win the game last night. And Chapman, who was unhittable early and horrific later, gave up like a 385-foot final out to win the game. If it goes out, they lose the game.
Right.
So he's still on the fence to me. But I think the Yankees are making the run because they have 2 lefties in the lineup and they play at Yankee Stadium. Mm-hmm. And you got to give Cashman credit for that because before that, they were terrible from the left side.
They were awful. I want to talk a little Olympics. It's, they're wrapping up. The 2 weeks is almost over. It's not Lake Placid. It's not the Russians and U.S., but France and the United States go at it tonight. In the gold medal game, France had beaten the U.S. team early last week, coming from a few down late. Mustafa Fall, Evan Fournier, Rudy Jobert, any of those names scare you? Or can USA concentrate and focus and get it done tonight? Because France is a good team. France is a big team and they can shoot.
France beat the U.S. in the 2019 World Cup as well. So they've got 2 straight wins over the U.S. But you got to think now, hey, look, the U.S. was down 15 or 16 to Australia.
15
came back and won easily. Right. So, but yeah, Hey, Rudy Gobert, Defensive Player of the Year multiple times in the NBA. Fournier I thought he became a star this year. He signed with the Knicks. We didn't talk much about the Knicks. You're right. You say Kemba Walker and Fournier. But, they're not climbing into championship territory. They're just climbing into – they had to pay Randall 4 years, $117 million. You had to pay him. He was terrible in the playoffs, but he was off the charts during the regular season. But I think the U.S. gets it done because they're the U.S. Durant looks like Durant. He had 23-9 against Australia, both team highs. I think they get the job done. But you're right. You can't count France out because they got good NBA players. And they also got that DeCola guy, who I don't think is in the NBA right now. I don't know if he was in the past, but he's unbelievable as well. But I think the U.S., we played them once. They beat us. Now we're going to kick their butts for the gold. We should mention the women are in the gold medal game as well. And also that the soccer team lost, but they did win the bronze medal. The women's soccer team lost, but they did win the bronze medal. I think, and I'm sure everyone agrees, Simone Biles is the big story. I'm surprised she came back. I'm glad she came back. She had to change her dismount so she wouldn't have to twist because she still has the twisties apparently. And she got a bronze medal. Now, she said she did it for herself and good for her, but I still think the problem with the whole thing, she's right. Afterwards, mental health has to be spoken about. You have Michael Phillips. You have Naomi Osaka. You have, you have Love from the Cavaliers. He's openly talked about it as well because this is a big issue. And she's right. It has to be talked about more. My concern, though, as I said last time, was to me, you've now given tons of young athletes at any level an excuse not to compete. And it might be mental health. And if it is, to me, that's a good reason not to compete. I agree. But if it's not mental health and you're just kind of afraid or you don't want to show up or I'm not sure about today, when we were kids, and even recently, 5, 10, 15 years ago, I don't think it ever entered your mind to say, I can't do it today. I can't go. And I think now, again, if it's mental health, that's fine. But I think it's going to be an excuse used by some people at all levels to say, yeah, I'm just not going to do it today. And they'll say mental health, and maybe it will be, and maybe it won't be. Maybe it'll just be, I'm scared, or I don't want to get my head kicked in, or I don't want to be embarrassed. And that's what I'm afraid of. Although, again, I give Biles incredible credit. And the fact she won a bronze, which, by the way, is what she won 4 years ago on the beam in Rio at the 5 years ago at the 2016 Olympics. So she could have been the silver medalist, but because, she changed her dismount so she didn't have to twist. And the announcer said, because the dismount was so much simpler, it cost her 3 or 4 tenths of a point just by using that dismount. If she had those points back, she would have won the silver. So maybe that nobody cares, but I give her credit. She came back. She was okay mentally. She got cleared and she won a bronze medal, and good for her. It was really the story of the Olympic Games, both not competing and then coming back to compete and winning a bronze medal.
Do you find it curious? I saw an article about Jonathan Owens. He's a safety for the Texans, who actually is her boyfriend. Said, he was sick to his stomach watching her and having her withdraw last week when she did, after she did the vault, and because he knows what she's going through. I'm not saying it's our business, but do you find it's a little interesting that no one has mentioned what's going on? I know her aunt died, but that was after she withdrew. It's just, did I miss something when I was away in Florida? Did she announce what the mental health issues are all about? Am I the only one who doesn't know, or are we in the dark here?
I would say it's been a little bit vague, but when you say mental health, Joe, even today, Michael Phillips is right. He went through this, but he won all the goals that he won, and he went through it. And Kevin Love went through it, and other people have gone through it. Naomi Osaka, because of the questions afterwards. So it's coming out. It's being talked about more. But you're right. When you actually talk about it, it's very vague. It's just mental health, which might be explanatory for a lot of other things. So she had the twisties, which was a physical thing. You know, she couldn't twist. You probably saw on the uneven parallel bars, you probably saw her fall off, miss, take a tremendous hit on the ground. And then we learned for the first time for me that you have a lot more padding in practice than you do in the Olympics, which strikes me as stupid.
Stupid.
I mean, that's just stupid.
Stupid.
But so she clearly had a fear of that. But what was the actual mental health disease problem? I don't think anyone's really specifically discussed it, except she had the twisties. And when you're in the air, I give her credit because it's really dangerous. This isn't, you can't make a 5-foot putt.
Right.
This isn't, you can't throw a strike if you're Steve Blass, or you can't throw the first if you're Chuck Knobloch or Steve Sachs. This is, you could really get hurt. I agree with that. So I think you're right, though. I don't think you're missing anything. Everything is kind of still vague to us, mental health, as opposed to specifically what happened. But at least Biles, we learned about the twisties and how if you lose that, you lose your mental health in the air. And that's a recipe for disaster.
I agree with you there. I totally am on board with that. Well, great stuff again, as usual, my man. You can catch Steve's stuff on his Facebook forum page. Speaking of sports, Wish Steve Kallas. You can also check out his videos, westchestercountypost.com on YouTube. You can find this podcast on YouTube every week, also on his Facebook forum page, also on my Facebook page. And we will rock and roll. We'll continue to go each Friday or Saturday, and it'll be posted on YouTube by the afternoon. This will be up by about noon today, and or 11 o'clock. And Stephen, great job as usual, man. Keep it going, and I'll be texting you tonight during that game.
All right, Joe. Great to be with you. I got to go.
You too, pal. I'll talk to you, man.